Well, salam, peace, and shalom. Welcome to Spring 22 session of Interfaith Explorations, a program of the Interfaith Center, co-sponsored by Process and Faith and Spirituality and Practice. I'm Sophia Said, your host. Along with me is Dr. J. McDaniel, our teacher. Having said that, you all know the theme and purpose of these classes. I will start by saying that I believe that film specifically is a very, very powerful medium in today's contemporary societies. And it's not only the content of the film or what the producer has in mind, which is important about it. That's just one side of the coin. What audience make out of the film, it is the other side. And that's why it's argued that act of film watching could actually create a religious experience within the viewer. And based on that, our focus in this class series is not necessarily on the content of the film, but it's your experience of the film and the potential of your experience to serve as a source of spiritual enlightenment or a religious source. So, having said that, today we have two wonderful films. Tina is presenting Minari, and Dr. McDaniel, our teacher, is presenting Kiss the Ground. And we will start with Tina actually.
Okay.
You are Tina.
Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I
Okay. Okay. I wrote down what I thought because I'm not very good extemporaneously, but I put Minari is a universal and at the same time specifically personal story about a Korean American farming family in Northwest Arkansas in the 1980s. Jacob and Monica Yee are gender or chicken sexing workers in a large factory. Jacob is also trying a 50-acre farming project with Korean vegetables, and he experiences water table problems with his quote, free water, which eventually runs out. And then he has to resort to hooking up to the utility, and sometimes he and his family are not able to pay the water bill, so that's a big problem. Monica, his wife, never wanted to move from the West Coast and is disturbed by their trailer that formerly belonged to Bucky Reed, who gave up farming and committed suicide. Paul, a neighbor and friend and worker for Jacob, exorcises the trailer of its dark spirits. Paul is also a life-size crucifix bearer who speaks in tongues as he walks the dusty back roads on Sunday. Sunya, Monica's mother, who comes in from Korea to help the struggling family, is an irreverent, what did I put here? Irreverent, feisty, and crunchy, but that is only her exterior. Inside, she demonstrates love for her young grandson, David, who has a heart murmur. She tells him that he is strong and should run. David grows to love her, but that is only after he pees in her saucer. At first, he considers her irrelevant and old-fashioned and not American. Anne is David's dutiful sister who obeys her mother by hovering over him and making sure that he doesn't overexert. Significant metaphors to me are the wooden cross, the importance of water in the beginning and fire at the end, resurrection and transformation. The Minari plant is so significant because it is the only plant in its species that is edible and not toxic. It flourishes and its second perennial growth. And my questions were, how do any of the metaphors above or otherwise relate to your life? And what transformation or resurrection has occurred in your life or experience with family? And I think I'll answer the first one for myself. All of those symbols were extremely meaningful to me. I really, really honed in on Paul and his cross because my mother used to say at times when I would ask her about situations, perhaps that were kind of sad, why do you think this is happening or what can we do about it? And she would say, Tina, we all bear our own crosses. And at a young age, I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I totally came to understand it when I got older. And then transformation or resurrection. I've had many in my life, and through various things, through church and through really mystical out of body experiences, and I can really kind of tune into that aura of mystery about the movies too, with the exorcism and the speaking in tongues. Not that I've ever done that, but I just thought that was very interesting. And also the transformation part, perhaps, and the carrying the cross. When I was very young, like David, he appears to be maybe 5 or something in the movie. When I was 5, we had a polio epidemic in Little Rock, and I had to wear a leg brace for a year. And I certainly couldn't run. And my mother in particular really, really, really overdid on the hovering. I guess she thought it was a kind thing to do to watch over me and make sure I wasn't going to get hurt. But at the same time, it significantly reduced my ability to think that I was a strong person. And I liked it in the movie when David's grandmother said, you strong, go run. And I just thought that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I really loved that grandmother because she kind of reminded me of my paternal grandmother, who shared some of the same characteristics as David's grandmother. She used to say, which was really funny to hear as a child, I'm going to run down Robinson Avenue. That was the street she lived on in Shreveport. When I'm 100 years old, I'm going to run down that street naked and say, thanks be to God, hallelujah, I'm still here. Well, we thought that was funny. And she also had full dentures, and sometimes she would tickle us and she would wiggle those dentures in her mouth, and it was just so funny and kind of weird, but funny. So I can relate to that grandmother whom most of you, if not all of you know, won an Oscar for that performance as Best Supporting Actress. And I found her to be a real redeeming and transforming character in that movie because she was so real. And anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Tina. And let me ask, do we get to see the trailer on this or not? Sophia, do you know?
Lewis had that, I noticed, but I didn't.
I think we should. I think we should have started with the trailer. Are you here, Louis? Can you show us the trailer? Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Let's watch it real quick, and then we'll deal with Tina's questions, which I look forward to.
David, look! They're wheels! Wheels?
여기 대체 어디야?
집이지? 우리 새로 시작한다고 그랬잖아. 이게 그거야. 아빠는 빅 가든 하나 만들 거야.
What a wonderful day to be in the house of the Lord. If you're here with us for the first time, please stand. What a beautiful family. Glad you're here.
How's your daddy like that new farm? He growing things good, doing things right?
Yes.
미국 애들은 할머니랑 같이 방 쓰는 거 싫어한다던데.
I don't like Grandma.
걔는 안 그래요. 한국애니까.
Grandma smells like Korea.
야, 뭐라고? 그랜마 스멜?
우리 여기 있다가 망할 거야. 애들을 위해서라도 한 번 더 생각해 볼 수 있잖아.
애들도 한 번쯤 아빠가 뭔가 해내는 거 봐야 될 거 아니야.
듣겨라 이놈아.
할머니는 진짜 할머니 같지 않아요.
할머니 같은 게 뭔데?
쿠키도 만들고 나쁜 말도 안 하고 먼저 팬티도 안 입고.
We need to find water somewhere. If that soil ain't wet, we're gonna lose the crop. 결혼하면서 했던 말 기억나? 미국에 가서 서로를 구해주자고 했던 거.
기억해.
어이 프리티 보이, 프리티 보이.
I'm not pretty. I'm good looking.
Thanks, Lewis. Now, how many of us, raise your hand if you got to watch the movie?
It was a beautiful movie. I didn't watch it.
Great. Who said that? Can you tell me who said that? I can't quite
I
see it.
didn't see it.
Who?
It's Carol who said that.
Oh, Carol. So Carol, what did you think of it?
I just said I didn't see it. I regret that I didn't see it.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, I saw the trailer and I loved the trailer.
Mhm.
And watching the boy's relationship with his grandmother, I could connect with, and that he grew past his embarrassment of her into a more mature perspective, in a more generous perspective. I appreciated. And I thought of the situation of immigrants in America and how they have to adjust and adapt to so many different circumstances. I thought of the fact that for some people throughout the world, living in America is a dream.
Mhm.
It is a dream. And they're deeply drawn to the image they have in their minds of America before they arrive. So that's what came to my mind. And then the three themes that are the themes that were mentioned by Tina. One is transformation. And if you recall, in the spiritual alphabet of the Brahmins, T is for transformation. It's being transformed from an old perspective into a new perspective, an old way of relating to the world to a new way of relating to the world. So that's kind of what came to my mind. Tina asked us to address the question of transformation, and can you find in your own life, your own experience, some kind of analogy where you too have been transformed and perhaps had to be. So any thoughts on that? Do we have any people that want to speak to T is for transformation?
Yeah, I'd comment a couple things. First, it seems to parallel a little bit of the Afghan resettlement that Sophia is on point on. And I've had the benefit of doing a lot of international travel. And as a white male, I've been listened to like I know what I'm doing. But in Malaysia, I got in a situation where I was clearly the minority. And even in Hong Kong, I was talking to an individual one time about the Far East. And he said, we're not far from anywhere. What do you mean the Far East? I mean, the Far East is a English term, far from London, I think this thing. So I think that being used to being oriented to the US culture, getting the jokes, understanding everything, and then being plopped down in an area you don't know the culture, you don't know the language, you don't know anything. And even I got lost in a Japanese underground because they're not English friendly. And I couldn't figure out if it was an ATM or a ticket for the underground, and there was nobody there to help. And so I think, if you're used to being oriented and used to being culturally accepted, and then you go to an area, and I was very empathetic about kind of the cultural issues of Arkansas welcoming different people. I mean, even at that church service and others, I think it's an important education to be uncomfortable and be disoriented, and at least appreciate what people resettling in the U.S. are going through.
Sophia, you have seen so much of this quite recently. Would you say a word about the kind of transformation that you see our African friends needing to undergo, and what images of America were in their imaginations before they got here, and what has it been like to be in this setting? And to meet Christians, I think they're hosted by Christians too, among others. Is that right?
Yes, Christians and Jews both
And Muslims.
are helping them resettle. But all of the Afghans that I have met are here very much by choice and by believing in the dream of America. I mean, there are other Afghans who had worked with military and who could have left but have not left. But the ones who are here, I mean, it's interesting how their life is changing, and it's very much aligned with the dreams that they had, even when they were working on the military bases. I mean, we have people who work with the military for 20 years and in a very sweet role, like as a baker for the soldiers, just making bread for them every day. So what I see is, what I saw a lot is an immense level of gratitude initially, and it continues. What I continue to see a lot is trust. I mean, these people have to put their trust in folks like us whom they don't know. I mean, just 10 minutes before this class, me and Louis were sitting with an Afghan right outside in the reception and having him sign a load of papers which he had no idea about. And I was brokenly translating to him what is in the papers, and I know he couldn't understand 70% of it. But he said, if you think it's good for me, I'll just sign it for you. And I looked at Louis and I said, Louis, you know what? I am very uncomfortable getting his signatures on these papers. They were government papers, just releasing them from the contract that the government had with them. And I'm like, even though he trusts us so much that he's willing to sign anything for us, he can't read, he can't understand. I don't have a perfect interpreter here who can help him understand. I myself don't understand those papers yet. But he's just willing to sign it because I'm asking him to. And he's here with his 8 kids, and he knows that tomorrow, if we are not standing behind him, he has no job, no home, and no place to go. So there is just this immense level of trust that these people have put in us, which is leading to transformation that you wanted me to talk about on both ends. That's what I would like to say. It's transforming them for sure, but I think it's transforming us more than them, because I don't have that level of trust in anybody in my life the way these people portray trust in us. I mean, with their kids, we can just take them anywhere, with themselves, with the doctors, with the signatures, with their money. We hold on to the little money they have, and we make the decisions with them, in collaboration with them. But due to the language barriers, eventually it boils down to them putting their trust in us, which is transforming us daily and making me believe in this common human denominator which connects us all.
Yes. Yes.
Is there anyone on here that has actually seen the movie other than me?
I have.
Do you have any reflections on it?
I had seen, let's see, I don't know if am I muted or not? I can't. This is Susan Fleming. I had seen trailers before and hadn't seen it until last night. I thought it was going to be this little pastoral, sweet, quiet movie, and it, it's much more dramatic than I had expected. The grandmother spoke to me as well. People had told me when I became a grandmother, it would be a transformative experience, and truly it is. And I really related to that a lot. I was pleased to see it was a relatively positive reflection of Arkansas. And you kind of see the best of what I would call some of the, for me, they looked extreme, the religious extremists. You sort of saw the good, sweet part, the goodness that is there. I just look and see the crazy, but there's so much goodness that's a big takeaway for me.
Mm-hmm. I really loved the movie. I watched it when you first sent it out, and I've had days to really just kind of ponder, just think about it. And one of the things that I woke up to this morning was the idea that there is so much waiting that we do in our lives. We wait for this and we wait for that. And even God tells us to wait on Him. And I think it takes a very long time for us to know this God of the universe, which is the universe for all of us, this personal God, whatever this is. It takes a very long time, but it takes even longer for me to get to know myself and see myself with His eyes. And that's what's really the difficult part for me. That's where the transformation comes, I think, for me, is just this hard part of seeing who we really are. Because if we can't see who we really are, then we are going to have a hard time affecting and loving and being with other people. So I think there's a lot of waiting that goes on in our lives. I've been waiting in a 54-year-old marriage for it to just get better and better and better. And it has not come at all the way that I had hoped it would come. I'm beginning now to see that, oh my gosh, the things that I've thought have been so bad for me have actually been a gift for me in my marriage. And so I just feel like that's what that movie kind of spoke to me about this morning.
Thanks, Darlene. Anybody else who's seen the movie and would like to comment, or simply comment on the theme of transformation, or respond to Sophia?
I saw the movie. I watched the movie, and I thought about the symbolism of the Minari growing. She brought those seeds all the way from her homeland, planted them, and actually didn't give them much care. They, unlike the other crops, which needed a lot of specific care and water and were at risk and all of that, this seemed to be growing heartily on its own with some tender, occasional care from the grandmother, from two generations, the grandmother and then her grandson. But when I watched the movie, I couldn't help but think about my own grandmother, who came from Poland, Russia, sometimes Poland, sometimes. And the stories that she would tell when she came and trying to adjust, where she, just like this grandmother, who never looked back, who never said, why don't you come back to Korea? Why don't you? It's not like the old days. My grandmother didn't do that because the old days weren't so great. So she was very happy to be in this land of the Golden Medina, the Golden Land. And whatever would happen, no matter who took advantage of them when they first got here because they didn't speak the language, no matter what happened, she trusted, as Sophia talked about, and she knew that this was the place for her, and she went ahead in that way. And succeeded in her little, way to be very proud American, just as I presume that this grandmother never looked back and never said, why don't you come back to Korea? She was happy to make a place for herself in this place where I was always waiting for someone to take advantage of them, or for some of them to be, I don't know how else to express it, but to take advantage of their kindness and their naivete. But that didn't happen in this movie. It was a very sweet movie in that way.
Mhm.
So I appreciated that. But I saw the symbolism of that plant. Yeah. So.
Thanks so much, Ellen. Anybody else like to comment on anything that's been said? Anybody have a thought?
The director of this movie had a lot of sort of semi-autobiographical things in it. And he said that he wanted water to be a very important symbol. Of course, it was for the crops, obviously. And, you had to apply the water for the crops, but the Minari grew wild, in open water at the creek. And it grew much better after its first year of propagation, which symbolizes, hopefully, the fact that they became independent farmers in their second year. And also the symbol of fire, he said, was, very important to him. And of course, that occurred when the grandmother was burning some debris in a big cylindrical can, and the wind drifted and went into their shed where they stored all their vegetables and totally destroyed it. And at that point, the big redemptive thing of that was that she went down the road. This was after she had suffered a stroke and she could really barely walk, but she goes down the dusty road and her little grandson and the granddaughter run after her and say, please, come back home. And they referred to it as home. Come back home and be with us. And the little David ran up to her and lovingly for the first time. So that fire to me kind of was a purging thing. Oftentimes we think of it as that, the phoenix rising and all that, but it turned out to be a transformative thing in the movie because, at least this is what I've read in reviews, it's possible that we can leave the movie thinking that they would now grow a Minari crop because Korean Americans really like it. Well, it was a real redemption in so many ways at the end. I thought it was very powerful.
Tina, you chose a great film for us to see or to learn about, even if we didn't see it.
Really touched me deeply. And you can
Yes.
see it. If you have cable, you can see it on TNT, or you can, if you have Amazon Prime, you can rent it, or you can get it at Redbox for pretty cheap, like $1.80, if any of you want to see it.
And I think you're mentioning fire at the end and how fire can be a springboard for new direction. I appreciate that a lot, as do we all.
Yes, that was really good, Tina. I really enjoyed what you shared.
It was a very powerful movie.
The fire, for me, the fire is always a transformative effect. And in this case, she had just said that she had completely lost faith in him, which is, that's really hard to come back from. I don't know how you can come back from that without always thinking it might happen again, or it's just a hard statement to make and come back from. And yet, I think the fire showed that you can. I mean, by her helping in the fire, by all that, by burning the smoke, all that stuff transformed the way she felt. And probably transformed the way he could trust her again, could trust her faith. So that was the statement that was most important to me, was when she said, "I've lost all trust in you." I just thought, oh my God, once you say that, where do you go from there? It's hard.
But marriages do survive when things like that happen. And that was, you're left anyway with the feeling that she did not leave him. She did not go back to California, his wife, that she was transformed through all the events that happened. And it was just, to me, extremely powerful.
Well, Tina, thanks again. And I think we'll turn to the second film now. And last week, you may remember that we watched a film that ended kind of in despair, and talked about the possibility that despair itself is an authentic spiritual emotion. When you face situations that merit despair, to be honest to the situations, you're going to feel despair. So despair can be a holy emotion also. But humans cannot live by despair alone. And we all need hope. We all need a sense that we can make a difference in the world in some kind of good way. So I chose Kiss the Ground, it's a documentary, as an invitation to hope. And I chose it. It was recommended by my son, age 30. And that's a generation of people who are can sometimes not have a lot of hope, given not just personal circumstances, but the state of the world. Global climate change, culture wars, the gaps between rich and poor everywhere, the shallowness of consumer culture. The world can look like a pretty tragic place. And there can be a temptation to turn to cynicism or anesthesia, spiritual anesthesia. I just won't feel anything anymore. Or to retreat into, I'm only concerned with my own personal spirituality. Thank you very much. But there is probably something in our universe that beckons us not only to be whole ourselves, but to want to create a whole world, and thus to kiss the ground. Because the world today is not the human world alone, of course. It's the soil, it's the hills, it's the rivers, it's the other animals. We're part of that. So my son said to me, "Have you seen Kiss the Ground?" And I'd had other people say that to me too. "Have you seen Kiss the Ground?" And I didn't like the title. I don't want to kiss dirt. But I watched it for my son's sake, and I watched it with my wife. And we watched it with our son. He watched it for the third time, sitting next to us. And we all got up from that film hopeful. Hopeful. Now, the key to our hope, I want to say something here, that I want to watch the trailer, and then I want Nita to say something. I'll explain. In the spiritual alphabet, N is for nurture. And is there something in you? Is there something in me where you want to be a nurturer. You may nurture in different ways, but you want to nurture life. And so what Kiss the Ground is about is how we can live in a nurturing relationship with the soil, with the earth. And we can participate in and be co-creators along with the soil, along with the earth, along with the natural world. There's a technical phrase for this. It's kind of a nice phrase. It's called biomimicry. Biomimicry. I want to mimic. I want to mimic, to imitate the regenerative powers of the earth. Not simply for my sake, but for the earth's sake. So with that in mind, let's watch the trailer, and then I'm going to ask Nita to share a story.
There's so much bad news about our planet, it's overwhelming. The truth is, I've given up. This is the story of a simple solution, a way to heal our planet. The solution is right under our feet, and it's as old as dirt.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Fossil fuels are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. When we damage soils, carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
But when we destroy soil, it releases carbon dioxide.
Biosequestration is using plants, trees, and techniques of grazing and farming to capture carbon and store it in the soil.
We can fix a lot of our climate issues if we bring the CO2 down into a living plant and put it back into the soil where it belongs.
Plants working with soil microorganisms, it seems too simple.
Healthy soils lead to a healthy plant, healthy human, healthy climate.
There could be a way to eat food that heals the planet.
The problem isn't the animal. The problem is where the animals are at.
How do we take waste and repurpose and reuse it, because it's really not waste?
The poop has to stay in the loop.
Compost is just one of a suite of soil-based carbon capture solutions.
We know how to do it. And if we continue to scale over 30 years, we can reverse global warming.
We can get the earth back to the Garden of Eden that it once was by regeneration. To see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated, that gives me hope.
Our health and the health of our planet are connected.
If you look over here, my neighbor's land that has been chemical fallowed, then you look over at our paddocks, you have a diversity of different plant species. Which model do you want your food to be produced from? The answer is pretty simple to me.
I'll make you a deal. I won't give up, and neither should you.
Now, Kathy and I, my wife and I, we have in our backyard a worm farm, a little compost area where we're feeding red wiggler worms that create compost. And what we did after we watched the movie is we went out and fed the worms. A very small act. It's not going to save the world, but it made us feel like nurturers, at least for that moment. I heard about a nurturer today when I read an essay by Nita Gilger. And the nurturer was her father. And the way he lived the last 3 years of his life, or therearound. So Nita, I was wondering if you might tell the story of your father, the nurturer.
Yes, I'd be honored to. We're approaching the
17th year, passing his death on February 25th, 2005. And so I wrote this story kind of because I was in the mode of thinking about him so much. The story is that my dad was an incredible gardener and a great professor of English and history and a lover of really great things. And he and my mom moved to Fort Worth, where we lived at the time, to be near family as they aged. And it was a good thing because shortly after they moved there, he had an emergency run to the hospital and they detected stage 4 colon cancer. And that required surgery, then several years of chemo, radiation, and even some experimental drugs. And Dad was remarkable during those years. He taught us so much, and his spirit soared in ways that I really can't explain, other than he had a divine connection that helped him through it. And he taught us many, many things during that time. But one of my most precious memories was it had gotten down to the point where the hospice doctor had said, you know, he's probably just got a few weeks to live now. And it was the fall before he died. And one day he called me out of the blue and he said, Nita, you got to come over here because I've got a whole bag of bulbs that I've ordered, tulips and crocus, daffodils. I want you to come over and plant these for me. I've got a whole little section. They just lived in a flower bed. I mean, in a condo with a small flower bed instead of the big house with the big garden that they had had previously in Tyler. And so he said, I want you to plant a few of these in my little flower garden. And then I want you to take a bunch of them and plant them in your big flower bed at your house. And so I thought about that. And I was busy working full time in ministry, and I was just meeting myself coming and going. And I don't know what that sound was. But I didn't really have time. What little time I had, I was taking off to take him to treatments. So I was a little frustrated, to be quite honest. So finally, after we had a great relationship where we could have honest talks, and finally I just said to him, Dad, why is this so important to plant these flowers? Because really and truly, you know, the doctor says you just have a short time left and you're probably not going to be here in the spring. And he said, honey, I know I won't be here, but you will be. And not only will you be, but others will see this beauty. And so I really want you to plant these. So I called in some friends to help me because it was a big project, actually. He had a lot of bulbs. And we planted them. And I think about that story so often. And even every time I see a daffodil or a crocus or a tulip in the spring, I know that beauty is worth it, that living with hope is worth it. And I treasure my dad for sharing that kind of perseverance, the kind of hope that he did. And at the very end, really just a short time before he died, he asked the oncologist, he said, I just need to know, did I make a difference? And the oncologist, who was is a wonderful man, took it to him and he squeezed it and he said, yes, Elmer, you made all kinds of difference by taking those experimental drugs. And Dad said, well, I just wanted to make sure that I helped the research along, that maybe some others wouldn't have to go through this. And I don't know if those experimental drugs helped the research, but I'm so glad the oncologist said that to him, because his smile was enormous. And he just nodded his head and said, that works for me. So that's it.
That's good. That's good.
So, yeah. I love the image of your father insisting that those bulbs be planted. And I think you said to him, but you mean you're not going to be around. And that didn't matter to him at all. And it invites us to think of the way we can help the world, not simply by doing things that we may see, but by planting seeds of hope for people we will never know. We will never know. And that's fine. And that's fine. So, any thoughts on the spirituality of nurturance and hope, and or the spirituality of ground kissing? And if you don't have any thoughts on ground kissing, I've got a question, but first let's just see what your thoughts are. Any thoughts on nurturance or hope or ground kissing? Carol?
I think I would speak to ground kissing because there is a custom when you arrive in Israel that you kiss the earth. So when the plane lands, first of all, people applaud, which they do in Europe too, but not in America so much. But when the pilot lands, there's applause. And then everyone gets off and actually literally kisses the ground. So it's an old tradition of honoring the earth in that way, this particular land with which there is a particular history. So, so that's not an unfamiliar term, but it's expanded as a result of this trailer, right? It's expanded my sense of that. And also there's a famous story in the Talmud about Honi, the circle maker, who brought rain when people needed rain, you know, that kind of a nurturer who was able to elicit the right prayers. And but one of the things he did was plant trees, and people said to him, old man, you know, you're not going to be here when the trees, much like the story, when the trees sprout. And he said, well, these, you know, I may not be here with these trees, but my children, grandchildren will be here, and so will yours. And so the notion that we put forward, pay it forward in very many ways in our lives, in what we teach, how we live, the generosity we show, and the care we extend to the earth. So I'm touched by the film, very touched by it. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for bringing it to my attention.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else on nurturance, hope, or ground kissing? By the way, Carol, Moses never saw the promised land. Is that correct?
From afar, from a distance.
From a distance. You know, but I kind of like that too, that you built things and you live from dreams that you may not witness yourself. But they're still important and you're still beautiful.
Right, right.
Jay, this is Jerry. Listen, I've got a friend, you probably know Allison Vetter, but her father was the first organic farmer in Nebraska, and obviously pioneered and took a lot of grief. And he's got a very healthy farm. He befriended Wendell Berry, befriended him, or he the other, and became close friends. But now he's really running kind of a prototype farm in Nebraska that people are starting to look at. And it's also neighbored by corporate farms that are killing their ground. And he's got healthy ground. And I really related to the trailer, the farmer that showed his fields and the fields next to him. And, you know, it's proving to be healthy, take some work and take some thought, but and I've met this individual. He's a very unassuming individual who is just tenacious about chemistry. He graduated from University of Nebraska, I think, with a chemistry degree or something like that, but he is always testing things. I mean, he's never there, but this whole issue about how to get healthy ground and grow healthy crops is kind of a ongoing test, but he's just impressive to know or hear about.
Yes, I know Allison, and I've met him once, and I agree with you completely. So anybody else in addition to Carol or Jerry, just the themes are nurturance, hope, and ground kissing. And if you can bring them together in some way, you get an A+. But if you can't, it's okay. Anybody? Priscilla?
Well, I'm not sure I can bring them together. I just was, I wasn't looking forward to seeing the movie. I thought it was going to be just another hopeless sort of
Mm-hmm.
documentary. And oh my gosh, it was just wonderful. It just filled me with hope. And I thought, I'm going to have to start my composting. Like Mary has a service where they pick it up once a week or something. And I thought, okay, I'm only one person, I shouldn't bother with it. But then I thought, well, okay, maybe I should. And I just wondered why more farmers are not into this. And then I wondered what the big chemical companies are going to try to do to these farmers. So that was sort of the edgy part that concerned me, but I came away with more hope, like there's something we can do. So that's all.
I also thought it ties back to Minari, because the family hopes were tied with that rich, fertile land.
Yes.
And that was going to be their way of surviving and thriving. So.
Thanks, Priscilla. Thanks, Tina. Probably time. And by the way, I think it's people are mentioning Braiding Sweetgrass and Holy Ground. It's a book that's means so much to so many people. I've got it 4 feet from me. I'll get it and I'll hold it up. I think I've got it there. And this book has just been powerful for so many people. And so it's kind of a compliment to Kiss the Ground. And may I suggest that you take a look if you're interested.
Can you say the name again, Jay?
It's Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's subtitled Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. It's a little like Kiss the Ground for me. So many people have recommended it to me, said you need to read this. So I do recommend it.
You know, I am the new person here, and I'm probably talking too much, so forgive me, but I was just so excited about watching that documentary. It gave me such hope. And I was just thinking, what am I doing to help our planet? And honestly, this probably sounds so silly, but I try to just buy organic food and to buy grass-fed meats and chickens that are, you know, free range. And I really try to do my part that way, and to just eat, to heal my body. And I'm kind of involved in functional medicine right now. And you saw in that movie, Dr. Hyman, I just have been with functional medicine kind of for about 4 years, trying to turn my health around. And it is amazing how what we eat truly is and can be our medicine.
Thanks, Darlene. Any last comments before we bring this to a close? And I want to just, Carmen has something to say. Lori, did you?
Yes, I have just a little bit to say, and that is that I often feel powerless, but I know that even small actions can they ripple out. It just matters. It really does just matter. And so I've made some changes to my own nutrition, how I eat and what I buy and from where I buy. food. And I have a little backyard, but I had a friend who is a master naturalist draw a plan for my little backyard. And over years, I was able to plant plants in the yard. And I believe that what I've planted supports bees and butterflies and gives back to the ground. I wanted to give back to the ground, and so I've done that. And I live alone, and composting, probably just not I don't think I generate enough waste for that, nor do I want to give time and energy to it, what I imagine it might be. So I bought a little machine that is it's called a food cycler, and it makes compost overnight. And then I take it out and pour it on the ground in my yard. And so that's the way I've been able to get into composting, is through investing in a machine like that can do that for me. So I'm going to watch the documentary. I didn't do that yet, but I will. It's nice to think of having something hopeful.
It is hopeful. It is hopeful.
That's so good to hear.
Carmen, last word, and then I think we bring this to a close. Carmen?
Very quick comment for those of you who don't have the ability to compost and put it in the yard. And I know we have rat problems. We compost coffee grounds, but there is an organization in Little Rock called the Urban Food Loop. And you pay them $31 a month, and we consider that a donation to a good cause. Every week they pick up a 5-gallon bucket of your compost, which includes just about anything from the kitchen. And then they recycle it, make compost, contribute it to gardens, and or bring you sacks of compost twice a year. So that's an option.
It sounds to me like we should have an interfaith composting network.
Get out of this meeting.
Where we're all committed in our respective locations to kiss the ground in our ways, but we do so in community with one another and in service to the earth and one another. Interfaith composting. That's the key.
Yes. And I think that's such a beautiful closing to today's class on this new idea that we have for another project. Well, thank you all for being a part of this journey of meaning making for us. I think today, like any other class, was a process of meaning making. And what I find really interesting is that this whole experience that we go through is a negotiation between three different entities. It's our text. In this case, it's film. We use film as a text. And then the viewers, who each one of us is, whoever has seen the film. And then the third entity in this process of meaning making is the reception, the site of this reception, the room, this discussion. And this whole process of meaning making of life for me is a negotiation between the film and the viewer and this class, this discussion. Yes. And sometimes it leads us to different parts of identity formation for us. And I think that's what was happening today. So thank you all for being a part of this process of meaning making with us. I will see you all next week, next Wednesday, with 2 new movies. Salam, peace, and shalom.
Salam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darlene.